This is an individual assessment report for the student Jacqueline. Jacqueline is a 10-year-old student who is in the 5th grade. So we're going to go ahead and look at some data. This information is being pulled from the iReady reading diagnostic test she took at the beginning of the year. iReady is an online program which takes the diagnostic test scores and uses that information to provide Jacqueline with individualized lessons at her own learning level. Jacqueline is required to do 60 minutes per week for homework in her class, but extra minutes would definitely benefit her as well as the other students. In August, when she took the iReady diagnostic test on the computer, Jacqueline scored an overall score of 540, which puts her at a 3rd grade level. At the beginning of 5th grade, the target score is 581, so Jacqueline did score a little low, but this is definitely something we will continue working on throughout the year. Our goal is to bring this up to a 5th grade level, which would be between 581 and 640. We will go through each of the sub-skills that made up the score of this diagnostic. Jacqueline has tested out of the phonological awareness section of this test. This means that she has mastered the ability to distinguish individual sounds that make up spoken words. So in this section, it included questions on rhyme recognition, phonemes or sound identity, isolation, blending, and segmentation of sounds, the addition and substitution of sounds, and deletion of sounds in words. Jacqueline also tested out of the phonics section of this test, which means she has mastered accuracy in decoding words. This section included questions to her test. This section included questions on her test that asked her about letter recognition, consonant sounds, short and long vowels, decoding 1 and 2 syllable words, inflection endings, prefixes and suffixes, vowel patterns, and decoding even longer words. Jacqueline also tested out of the high frequency words on the test, which means she has mastered recognizing frequently occurring words, which are a mixture of decodable words, which are words that can be sounded out, and trickier exception words, which are words that have to be learned and recognized by sight. These words make up a large proportion of the words that she will be reading in everyday text and using in her writing, even as an adult. Jacqueline scored a 549 on the vocabulary section of this test, which puts her at a 4th grade level, which is a little behind, but nothing we can't work on. Since this test, I've seen a lot of improvement in this area. This section asked her about academic and domain-specific vocabulary, word relationships, word learning strategies, reference materials, prefixes, suffixes, and root words. So the final 2 sections are about comprehension. The first one is literature and the second one is informational text. These seem to be the area that Jacqueline needs the most practice with. Jacqueline scored a 536 on the literature comprehension section of this test, which puts her at a 3rd grade level. This section asks questions on fictional texts and stories about point of view, purpose of the story, cause and effect, making inferences, figurative language, theme, summarizing, word meaning, and citing textual evidence. For her iReady comprehension score for informational text, she scored a 534, which also puts her at a 3rd grade level. This section included questions on author's purpose, cause and effect, making inferences, fact opinion, main idea and detail, summarizing, and citing textual evidence as well. Comprehension seems to be an area that we will have to be working with and will continue to focus on in both literature and informational text. Because Jacqueline scored a 2 on her 4th grade reading FSA, we conducted an assessment known as the benchmark assessment system at the beginning of the year, and these are the scores Jacqueline scored. Her independent level is an S. An independent reading level is the highest level at which a reader has adequate background knowledge for the subject and can assess text very quickly and with few errors. Think of an independent level as the highest level you would ask a child to read without help. Her instructional level is a T. Instructional reading level is the highest level at which a reader is not quite independent but has adequate background knowledge about the topic and can assess text quickly with little to no errors. Independent level, you could think of an independent level as the highest level you would ask a child to read with just a small amount of assistance. Her frustration level is a U. Frustration reading levels include text in which a reader does not have adequate background level for the topic or cannot meet criteria for instructional levels of accuracy and rate. A frustration level is a level that will require extensive help from a teacher or parent. Students are considered at a 5th grade level with an independent BAS level of T to W. Jacqueline scored at a very late 4th grade level, which is only slightly behind where we would like to have her to be entering 5th grade with. We will have another BAS assessment coming up in a few weeks, and I am definitely confident that she has bumped up at least a letter grade in that time. There's also a part of the benchmark assessment system that focuses on fluency. Jacqueline scored a 2 on a scale of 0 to 3 in that section. Fluency is the rate of reading, so the speed and smoothness at which the student is reading. And based off that score, Jacqueline's doing very well. A score of 2 means that Jacqueline reads primarily in 3 to 4 word phrase groups and uses some smooth, expressive interpretation and pausing guided by the author's meaning and punctuation. So there's appropriate stress and rate with some slowdowns. She's definitely at par with her peers in this domain. The next set of data is from an informal reading assessment known as the Qualitative Reading Inventory 6. This is an assessment I gave Jacqueline. We completed it in about 2 30-minute segments in the morning, 2 consecutive days at the beginning of the second quarter. It started out by her reading a few word lists, then a few passages based on the words used or shown in the list. The first thing we will look at is how Jacqueline scored on the reading passages. We'll start with the oral reading of passages, which is where she read the story aloud to me and then answered some questions I asked her at the end. The first passage she read was at a level 4. It was a narrative about Amelia Earhart. She scored a 58% on the concept questions, which are questions that are asked prior to the reading to assess her prior knowledge on the topic. These questions are not used to score her reading levels or anything, but they do help me interpret from her performance to see if there's any correlation between prior knowledge with the concepts in the story and her scores. She scored an absolutely perfect score in word recognition. This allows me to analyze the nature of reading miscues or mistakes and allow me to recognize any need she has in word recognition, but as you'll see, Jacqueline is excelling in this department. This information helps me to determine that her reading level is independent. She is completely capable of reading and decoding words as she reads and making self-corrections when she makes an error. After reading, I asked Jacqueline some questions to check how well she understands what she read. I first asked questions and scored them based off of her memory alone, in which she scored a 63%, which is a frustration level. Then I asked the same questions, but allowed her to look back at the story, and she scored a little better with a 75%, which would put her in instructional level range. The second passage that she read aloud was a level 4 expository passage about plant adaptations. She rocked the concept questions before reading and also received a perfect score on the word recognition. She obtained the independent reading level on this passage too. Her comprehension without looking back in the passage was quite low at 38%, which is a frustration level, but when she was able to look in the passage, she scored a 100%, moving to an independent level. I was curious to see if Jacqueline could bring up her comprehension without look-back scores with a lower level. The final oral reading passage she read was a level 3 narrative called The Friend, in which her concept question score was 92% and her word recognition percentage was at a 100%, maintaining her independent reading level. At this level 3 passage, Jacqueline was able to obtain 100% in comprehension without lookbacks. This showed that she was definitely independent at a grade 3 level. Overall, Jacqueline's reading fluency and oral reading ability is right where she needs to be in 5th grade. She's an independent reading level, reading with 100% accuracy for all the stories she was tested on, regardless of her score on the concept questions and her prior knowledge. The way Jacqueline is consistently scoring 100% on the word recognition suggests automaticity in the word identification. This shows that the words are not being decoded word by word and she's processing the words as a whole unit. Jacqueline's comprehension scores fluctuated in her oral reading passages. When she was able to look at the passages, she scored much higher than when she was first asked to answer. This shows that she probably understood the text the first time around, but needed some prompts to remember what exactly happened when asked about specific events. These next passages require Jacqueline to read silently to herself before answering the comprehension questions. The first passage was about Tommy de Paola and was a level 4 narrative. She scored an 82% on the concept questions, which showed that she had some background on the topic. Without looking back at the passage, Jacqueline hit her frustration level with a 63%. When she did look back in the passage, she hit her instructional level with an 88%. I chose to move her down to a level 3 expository about wildcats. She scored a 91% on the concept questions. Without looking back at the passage, Jacqueline scored an 88%, which puts her at an instructional level, but when she was able to look back, she scored a 100%, maintaining her level 3 independent level. Overall, she seemed to do a little better on the silent reading, which happens with some students because they focus more on their reading ability when they are reading to an adult, but she still seems to consistently be at a level 4. Listening comprehension. I read these two passages to Jacqueline in order to test her listening comprehension. The first passage was a level 4 expository about early railroads. She scored a 75% on comprehension, which makes that her instructional level. In order to find Jacqueline's independent listening comprehension level, I moved back to a level 3 narrative, and even with an 83% on the concept questions, she scored a 100% on the comprehension, making that her independent level. Just a side note that these comprehension questions were given to her without looking back in the passage because I was reading the passage to her. So finally, the word recognition list. Jacqueline's total scores on the word list and word identification levels on the orally read passages indicate that Jacqueline has the ability to identify words individually and not in context at an independent level up to level 6. Many of the words Jacqueline read on the leveled word list indicate that she can automatically identify most words on sight up to grade 6, but given a few extra seconds, she continued to be able to correctly identify 70% of the words on the upper middle school and 50% on the high school list. Based off Jacqueline's word identification list and oral reading, her word recognition percentages show that there is no difference between her ability to identify words in context and words in isolation. She is exactly where she needs to be in this area, and in fact, she's quite ahead. Overall, Jacqueline is a really great student. She was always focused and on task. I would say her instructional level is a level 4, which is just behind grade level, but she is progressing in all subjects, and I have no doubt that she will be able to catch up to speed in comprehension. We will definitely continue to work on comprehension strategies in reading groups and as a whole class. This seems to be the area that most students in our class are struggling with. But I cannot emphasize enough iReady Minute. iReady Minutes will focus on the skills that she is struggling in and is completely individualized to her learning needs. It will definitely help reinforce skills that we work on in class and preview what we haven't worked on yet. We will also do a lot of work in the Reaching for the New Reading Standards book, which includes specific skills that we need to work on and gives us passages that focus on one skill at a time. I want to thank you so much for all that you do, and I cannot wait to meet back up with you and talk about all of Jacqueline's progress.